Hi, everyone. It is an honor to be a speaker at this year AI in the New Era. As part of my talk, I will cover how to surface and address your customer pain points through the Lean AI innovation framework. Why is this a problem, you will ask? Well, what we have seen over the past few years is that a number of issues have been highlighted with the carrying and delivery of generative AI projects. Back in July 2024, Gartner predicted that 30% of all projects would be abandoned by the end of 2025. Similarly, a CIO Dive report in March 2025 um, showed that the rate of failure of a project was always on the rise. And they estimated that the number would increase to 42% by the end of 2025 from 17% in 2024. And then the MIT, in their NANDA report in July 2025, showed that despite the large amount of investment that was done in AI projects from the enterprise, 95% of these projects either failed or returned to return any to provide any return on investment. That is a 5% that really of project that were really able to extract value from carrying out the project. So what are the traditional pitfalls that leads to these projects failing? Well, the first one is undefined business problems. The project failed because there is no clear or measurable problem that is in line with the day-to-day operation of the business, making it impossible to really prove its value. Poor data quality is another big one. So in this case, it's really that the projects are abandoned when the underlying data is not aligned with the goal. It's either low quality or it's incomplete, which leads to unreliable and effective results. And then what we see a lot in the enterprise still to this day is a limited of AI literacy. So there's still an unrealistic expectation and misguided use cases about what Gen AI's true capabilities and limitations are. And this tend like to lead to cost overruns and missed timelines. And finally, we have the pilot to production chasm. And what this is really referring to is that when people are doing a pilot or a proof of concept, they tend like to focus on very specific use cases and very specific data point. And when we're trying like to scale this to the enterprise at large, these don't tend like to apply because we were looking at that narrow case as opposed to the overall case. And often the other problem is that people are focusing on the POC in itself and not about the complexity of integrating with the existing workflows or operation and existing systems. So what is the Lean AI innovation framework? Well, the Lean AI framework is an iterative process that enables people to understand what the problem is. And it starts with discovery. And discovery is really about emphasizing and understanding the jobs that your customer or your users are doing. One framework that helps here is a jobs to be done framework, which focuses on identifying the process a customer is following when trying like to accomplish a specific goal. So what you have is when a particular situation occur, I want to do something so I can prove something in terms of my outcome. So throughout this presentation, I'm going like to use a working example of a news agency that is trying like to develop a new product. So the problem statement in this case is when I have limited time and I'm constantly bombarded by sensationalism and unreliable sources of information, I want to receive personalized and concise summary of only the most critical, globally and significant development that I am interested in, so that I can stay genuinely informed about important event without feeling emotionally drained or compelled to engage in unproductive debates. So that's my working example. Once you have your working example, it's really important to identify the type of user that you want to interact with to get feedback. And here I like to leverage like the diffusion of innovation as a principle. The diffusion of innovation is looking at the type of user that may be involved or may be interested in your product. And you can separate between three main groups. The innovators and early adopters, that are people that are willing to try like your solution and will want to learn. The early majority, that are people that are coming and joined. And then the last one is the late majority and laggards, which are people that tend to not really be open to new development. So when you are trying like to leverage user experience and interviews to speak to your customers, you really want like to focus on innovators and early adopters, people that will be willing to provide feedback and be willing to experiment with the product that you're generating. Now, there are many tools that enable to do this gathering of information as part of the discovery phase. One tool that I like is the empathy map. Because what it does, it enables design thinking and product development in a way that you can understand users' need by focusing on what they say, what they do, what they think and feel. It helps the teams emphasize with users, synthesize research observation, and gain insights into the user needs. So let's go back to our working example. So we have our news. Well, who are we targeting? Well, who do we want to target in the goal? Well, busy professionals or individual focus on mental well-beings. That's our first. Well, what do they see? Well, they see that there is more and more clickbait headlines or AI generated and sensationalized AI images. What do they hear? Did you see that outrageous headline? Fake news is everywhere. The world is falling apart. And what they say is that really they want like the facts without the drama. And often they wonder why like the information is so polarized. So what we ultimately is we see that what people are doing is that they are either paying for newsletter or aggregated services, or they are unknowingly or accidentally sharing information that is unavailable. So what are the pains? Well, we see that like people are emotionally drained. We see that there is a news fatigue, and really that people want like to be genuinely informed. They want to get a balanced perspective on the information that is provided. So now that we have identified the problem, we get like to the second phase, which is the design or exploring ideas and refine and challenges or assumptions. One of the things that I found very useful is to really look at visualizing a solution. Today, you have a lot of tools from Canvas to Figma and others that are really enabling you to generate UI that can be shown to users so that you can prioritize the features and the hypotheses that are meaningful to your customers. What is also very important is to test your assumptions. So what we find is that people tend like to assume when they are speaking to customers what is the best solution or what is the problem that they have. And really, there are several type of assumptions to take in mind. The viability assumption, which is ensuring that IDs can be realistically accomplished and maintained. Feasibility, where you are evaluating whether a concept can be turned into a practical reality or not. Adaptability, preparing for changes and being flexible and adjusting strategies, and usability, focusing on the ease with which user can interact with a product or service. So let's go back to our working example, where in this case, what we want like to assume is, or we want like to challenge, is what is really is meant by um, the information of, the overwhelming of information. Well, is it that the user need to know about critical bad news or just like news in general, or that we want to filter all type of negative news? Now, once you have challenged all of these assumptions, there are certain tools that you can leverage to be able like to document the information that you're provided. One tool that I love using in this context is a business model canvas. And why is it important? It's because it enabled you to think about like your key partners. Think about like the customer segments that you are identifying and targeting. What are the value proposition that you are offering to your customers? And what are the potential revenue stream? What are the key resources that you need to take into account? And what are the work that you need to do to achieve like your project and to achieve your deliverables? So let's go back like to your working example again. So in my news example, what I have identified as my value proposition is being able to filter unreliable sources, time-saving summaries, personalized relevance, and genuine informedness. And to achieve that, there are certain key activities that I need to have, like summarization or trust scoring, fact checking. And I may not be able like to do this by myself. So I may want like to work with partners like reputable news publishers or fact checking organization so that I can deliver the solution that is relevant to my customer segments, which is busy professional, individual focused on mental well-being, and people that want to try and discern truth seeking. Now, this is traditional to any project management. With AI project, there is an added complexity of trying like to think about what technology best fit to the problem that you're trying like to address. Um, a lot of companies in this context tend like to look at the latest shining object, in this case, generative AI or deep learning, and try like to retrofit the technology to the problem. The problem with this is that generally that fails because you have not really identified the problem in the first place. What also happened is that in certain industries, and especially regulated industries, it is really important to provide information about the transparency and the explainability of how you got to your answer, which generative AI cannot offer. So looking at this, like we can classify AI in three main buckets. On the one hand, you have symbolic AI. That's on the very left side of the spectrum. This is very manual process where you're defining rules or you're defining knowledge base with information. It's great because it's explainable, it's transparent, it's repetitive, and it's predictable. The problem is that once you have new information, it's brittle and inflexible, and it doesn't really handle uncertainty. That's where machine learning becomes a very good solution because there you can leverage data to identify patterns. From these patterns, you can actually adapt to things that you may not have seen before. Now, the other good thing with this approach is that it still provides you some level of explainability and transparency. The problem is that you really need a large amount of data. And in many cases, it's susceptible to bias. So if your data is biased towards a particular demographic, for example, then that is going like to translate into the model. Finally, you have the generative AI, which is really like the latest family of AI, which is great at handling unstructured data. And it's great at uncovering hidden pattern. But as I said, one of the issues is ethical and practical concerns about the data being shared across the web, or the unpredictability and inconsistent output that are generating by these systems. Now, in practice, what I like to use is an approach that combines symbolic machine learning and generative AI, which is called Neuro-Symbolic AI. And that's really like enabling you to leverage the best of all worlds. So let's imagine that you have a predictive model that you want to do. A machine learning model can learn from the patterns that exist from the data, whereas you can leverage symbolic AI or rule-based system to deal with the exceptions. Similarly, you can leverage generative AI to extract information from text, and you could leverage symbolic AI as a way to implement guardrails to verify that the output is correct. Now, another thing that is really important when dealing with AI project is looking at the data that you have. So we started with the jobs to be done, so what we want to like to offer. But what we want to like to look after that is what data do I have? So that now I can create an experiment with a given set of hypotheses and a given set of failed conditions that I can put within a time box, and which I would populate prior to the experiments. And then as I have finished my experiment within the time frame that I've decided, I would start recording things like the insights. What have I learned from what was going on, and what are the next steps? Now, there is another big part of AI project that you need to think about at the design stage, which is how are you going like to implement responsible AI principles? This covers things like fairness. I alluded to that about the demographics, but really fairness is about treating all individuals and group equitably within the data and within the output. Transparency and explainability, providing clear and accessible explanation of how the system works. Why did it do what it did? Accountability, ensure that the decision, a trace that you can track what part of your system was able to reach to the conclusion that it did. Privacy and security, the safeguard of the information, especially if you're dealing with personal identifiable information or PII, you want to make sure that you have the right process to keep that information safe and not being propagated. Reliable and safe. You want your system to perform consistently and accurately and safely under varied conditions. And the expert in the loop. Especially when you're dealing with enterprise solutions, it is core to have an expert in the loop that is actively going to participate in the development, operation, and supervision of the system that you are developing. Now, when we are looking at some of these problems, one of the problems that I mentioned is fairness. And one way to address the fairness problem is really like to look at the team that you're assembling. And the team that you're assembling should not only be consisting of people from different background, of different expertise, like a DevOps or UX product manager, project manager, data engineer, and data scientist, but it should also be varied and diverse in terms of demographics. And what that enables is that it enables you to spot potential blind spot, challenge assumptions, and identify bias. Now, one thing that is also core at this point, and goes like to what I was saying about the expert in the loop, is that you need to make sure that you have someone that understands the enterprise problem as part of your team. And that means having a subject matter expert that is joining you. Another way that you can lead like to a clear and transparent solution is by leveraging something like a model card. And that will document the information about the model that you're using, the data that you use like to train it, what were the metrics that you use like to assess it, and so forth. So now you have your data set and your algorithm, you have tracked like the decision and the evaluation to get transparent outcome, and that overall gives you accountability. So now we have dealt with the discovery. We know the problem that we're trying to solve. We have a design of the solution that we want. Let's go into the implementation. Well, as part of the implementation, What has been a very successful approach is leveraging the minimal viable product, which is a way to develop pilot or product with a basic set of features that address user pain points and provides value early in the development cycle. Well, why is it called minimal? Well, it's because it's focused on the essential features. It is viable because it delivers enough value to attract early adopters and generate valuable learning. And it's a product because it's a working solution that the user can leverage and can give feedback on. Now, one of the things that is important, like to take into account as you're going through this process, is taking something like the impact effort matrix, where you're looking at all of the different items and all of the different features that have been identified, and looking at the one that are going like to provide the most value to your customer. So really, what you want like to look at is the high impact and low effort because these are going like to be the quick wins. These are going like to be the one that you can validate very quickly, whereas the major projects, so high impact but high effort, tend like to take a longer time before you get the feedback that you're looking for. Now, another big thing that is important as part of this process is to make sure that you are involving a iterative user experience assessment. What this means is that you're not waiting until the end to get the feedback from the customer, but you are enabling monitoring and user feedback to ensure that the information that you are getting back and is enabling you before you're launching the product. This will enable you to pivot if needed and enable you to adapt and improve the product that you're developing based on real case. So we've done our discovery, we've done our design, we've done the implementation, and now what our last step is to evaluate. Now, this is really about looking at what are your North Star. So one of the mechanisms that you can look at your North Star, it's by looking at objective and key results, or OKRs. And that is looking at defining like what are the ambitious goals that you want like to do based on the job to be done that you have identified. So let's go back to a working example where we want to empower users to feel genuinely informed and emotionally resilient in their news consumption. So a key result would be that increase the percentage of user reporting feeling calm after daily digest use from X to Y, or achieve an average trustworthiness rating of 4.5 out of 5 stars. Another way would be like to reduce the average daily time spent consuming essential news by 10 minutes. This could be achieved by providing summarization, for example. Now, another aspect to take into account, and I mentioned this is by part of the design, where because you have defined a use case or a problem that can be measured, you can then use key performance indicator as a way to monitor the health and performance of your product. So the digest engagement, for example, could be the daily active users. Or the email open rate if you are using a newsletter for communicating and access the user. It could be like trust and quality, the source and diversity score. It could be the stress level being lower and being improving or decreasing over time. Now, what is important is that as you go along, that you don't necessarily continue to invest in something that the user have told you was not going to work. So it's always important to take into account the data that you're receiving to determine whether or not you should pivot or persevere. So let's say like that you want to persevere. Well, we see high retention, low self-reported stress level, and positive feedback on trustworthiness and conciseness. Well, that means that we are going in the right direction. It could be that we are missing some things around personalization, or that we need to refine some of our filters to provide better stop. But then if a pivot would be, well, we have implemented all of these filters and all of these things in place, but the user is still reporting high emotional drain or distress, or find like the summaries are too concise. Well, in that case, we may pivot because we may not have addressed like the problem correctly. Now, we spoke about like the business canvas earlier, and I think that it's important to keep that in mind as you go along and that you continue to document. It's not, I've done my design and I'm only going to use it at that point. No, the business canvas is a living document that you can reuse over different time. So let's say that I've done my MVP now and I got my early feedback. Maybe I realize that fact-checking organization is not a good partner for me. And maybe the customer segment of discerning truth seekers is not the most important. And that developing my own large language model is probably not something that can scale. And maybe I want like to leverage out of the box language models instead. But also, as I am going through the implementation and I've gone through my first release, I also want like to add additional information. Now I have an idea of what channel I want like to send my information to. What is the cost structure? What is a revenue stream that I'm interested in? Now, what is like all of this about? Well, really, it's about putting in place a framework that will enable you to deliver a successful aged AI initiative. As Theodore Levitt said, people don't want a quarter-inch drill. They want a quarter-inch hole. So people don't want AI as a technology. They want a solution that is going to address the pain point that they have on a daily basis. So what does the lean AI innovation provide? Well, it enables you to look at analysis and design and delivery of your AI project by focusing not on developing the product, not on simply asking what the user wants, not on matching the market trends, but really on understanding the user and what they're trying like to do so that you are delivering a solution that will delight them. Thanks all for listening to me. I am Quentin Reul. I am a director of AI strategy and solutions at expert.ai. And you can reach out to me through these different social media framework of LinkedIn, YouTube, Blue Sky, or Medium, where I publish information as I go along. This being a presentation about AI, I should point out that a lot of the content was generated through AI or with the assistance of generative AI, especially around the pictures, but none of them were armed. And all of the content was curated, reviewed, and finalized by myself before being included in the presentation. And with this, I thank you all for the opportunity to listen to me and the opportunity for me to speak to you. And speak to you soon. Bye, everyone.